we're going to get underway. It is my pleasure to introduce a mentor and friend. Dr. Greg Hood worked with me in Lexington, Kentucky. He is an internist practicing in the community and also an assistant professor with the University of Kentucky. He's been in practice over 25 years. And then in Kentucky's history, he's only one of the 10 MACP designees in the last century. He is also, like our own Dr. Panda, an FRCP. He is a past president of the California Society of Internal Medicine and past governor and laureate of the Kentucky chapter of the American College of Physicians. He publishes regularly. He has a blog that I would encourage you guys to read, and is a principal investigator in medical quality improvement research in a partnership with Washington, D.C. Sustainable Healthy Communities. As COVID emerged, he became the backup medical director for the Lexington Fayette County Board of Health. And in 2020, he was inducted into the Lafayette High School Hall of Fame, which is a hard thing to do. So I welcome him back as a friend and mentor, and I hope that you will continue your journey on some of the ideas that he presents, and he will be available for questions after his presentation.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted with the invitation and the kind introduction. So a couple footnotes first. This is peak grass and locust season. So if I sniffle or cough a little bit, I promise it's not COVID. And hopefully while we've been getting settled in, you've looked at this initial quote, which I won't read for you. The words here look like they could be pulled from anything written today, but actually this was written in a book that was published in Boston in 1908. And so what this shows is the stresses and the demands that we feel certainly are contemporaneous for the times we're in, but they're also parts of the human experience. And the stress, the demands, the loneliness, the fears are all very human things that we have to deal with. So if we think about 1908, since this book was published, the first Model T was sold, instant coffee was invented, the first talking motion picture was shown, tanks weren't invented when this book was published, neither even was the brassiere. And if we think since then, how many wars have there been? How many social trends? There have been 2 full pandemics since then, and loneliness itself has long coexisted and was growing well before the COVID pandemic. I would say it's its own pandemic. Up to half of adults reported significant times or always feeling alone before the COVID pandemic. And of course, those numbers are higher now. So as we look at this and as we leave from here, I do hope you find some of the thoughts useful. And I hope that when we're done, you can describe loneliness and have collaborative discussions with your peers. Generate a list of personal solutions and collaborative solutions as well. Humans are social creatures. We do need connections and also periodic respites of solitude, but there's a big importance between being alone and being lonely. Frieda Fromm-Reichmann postulated that loneliness lay at the heart of nearly all mental illness, and as may be topical in the news recently, the lonely person is just about the most terrifying spectacle in the world. As neurobiology of loneliness has been studied further and additional conclusions reached, her assertions have largely been confirmed. Loneliness itself has been recognized in a couple of studies to be a potentially greater risk to health than smoking 15 cigarettes a day, and a greater health risk than obesity. Although, of course, as we go through this, I think you'll recognize that some of the emotions that stem to or feed loneliness probably contribute to both of those habits as well. Loneliness specifically disrupts hormone signaling. It re-regulates the expression of behavioral genes and increases systemic chronic inflammation, including vascular inflammation. It's associated with Alzheimer's disease, type 2 diabetes, hypertension, heart diseases, neurodegenerative diseases, and even has impact on cancer. Tumors have been found to metastasize more quickly in people who rate high on loneliness inventories. And a key facet in this appears to be the feeling of rejection as the most damaging element. Believe it or not, physicians are human too. Reflect for a moment, if you will, why did you choose clinical medicine as a career? There are typically many reasons and motivations which spring from a fundamental personal priority of connecting with other people and helping them. I love this slide. I don't think there's a more perfect visual representation of the balance that we try and strike within our souls and our lives as people and humans. We have to balance family, friends, the community, our work, our patients, our colleagues, and our individual needs for fitness and proper nutrition, our spiritual needs, and although as a profession we don't hearken to this fairly well, the need for rest as well. How often, and this is not for open response, but how often do you feel a lack of companionship? How often do you feel left out? How often do you feel isolated from others? These three questions are an inventory that comes from UCLA, and it is something you can apply with some of your patients that you struggle with some things that we'll hit on a little later. But for yourself, as you look at these questions, I'd encourage you to ask the second question twice of yourself. Once for within the profession and once for within your greater life circle, because we all have family, and doctors do need friends that aren't doctors and activities that aren't medical. We want to exhibit trust and kindness with others who share in particular with their professional struggles germane to today's talk, both in public interactions and in private and in shared spaces. I'm really energized and encouraged to be here speaking today, not just because we were planning this talk when COVID emerged and the in-person lectures were suspended, but because I've gotten a chance to be around the system, and I will say sincerely, I find the Erlanger system impressive. What we're going to talk about are human elements, but of course corporations are made up by humans. And those collective wills and intents and choices really make quite the difference. I've been in places like my own residency, which had a fabulous corporate soul and philosophy. I've been in others that haven't. And I see a lot that's really encouraging here, and I appreciate being able to experience it with you today. But overall in healthcare, the relentless corporate trend to fragment healthcare delivery has exerted an inexorable pressure on the soul of the physician and the soul of healing. Today's physician work habits foster isolation. The changes, as Dr. Fry said, have led to an increasing sense of professional loneliness that not only threatens the quality of clinical care by replacing personal discussions about patients, but also poses risk to physician personal and professional well-being. Going to go back a little bit since I'm older than I think more than half of the room, but pleased to see colleagues across the spectrum with us today. Not just talk about the old days or wear rose-colored glasses or talk about the new days, but the differences in how we experienced the shared crucible of training and what changes to that recipe lead to in the outcomes, and the opportunities and choices that we have today, some to a greater extent because of some of the reforms that have come in. Rebecca Solnit said, mutual aid and pleasure are linked, that the ties that bind are grounds for celebration as well as obligation. Historically, meaning, physicians with some gray hair like me, we've moved through all venues of medical care. We've gone to our offices, we've seen patients in the hospital, we've had roles in the community. We were connected as a professional community, often maintained through informal gatherings. I was really delighted. I spent some time in the doctor's lounge, had a very nice conversation with Dr. Carr, to see a nice setup and support there, and some nice conversations going on. Informal gathering within clinics or pods, and also the work of professional organizations. One of my good friends reminded me his county medical society used to put on an annual Christmas party for all the physicians and APPs in the county, and that doesn't happen anymore. It's that way to come together as a shared community and share some experiences is just evaporated. Of course, we can also have common educational and professional experiences. It'd be nice to get out of town at away meetings as well. And we, to a completely autonomous extent in the past, were able to set our own schedules and priorities within our own practices. Not always, but too often today, physicians are fragmented into narrowly defined workspaces and job descriptions. They work in divided locations, divided specialties, subspecialties, subspecialties, with schedules too tight to even leave their nurse's station pod or desk, even for lunch. Many employers disincentivize participation with professional organizations, and schedules and priorities to a much greater and sometimes excessive extent can be dictated to physicians. I want you to read or study this, but just as an example, our colleagues in neurology, I used to be able to just call upstairs and speak to this neurologist or that about a patient that I thought would meld best with their experience and personality. Now there's 16 different subsets of neurology management, and at least in Lexington, there are 2 general neurologists left. You have to know every single subspecialty for every single neurologist to get each patient to one or multiple neurologists, as just an example of over division, I think, in healthcare. Osler said, the best preparation for tomorrow is to do today's work superbly well. Historically, kind of like the Band of Brothers, if you ever saw that miniseries, we worked in the trenches, we labored through the night, and in learning together, we witnessed full progressions, whether it was an acute coronary syndrome progressing through heart blocks, whether it was the first 24 hours of a preemie's life, you got to experience all of it. We would eat together, even if it was 3 a.m. in the doctor's lounge. We'd talk about admissions, tell stories, we'd listen and learn. And decades later, some of those stories are still what I remember most, certainly more than what I remember from a lot of new conference lecturers. We would experience a new area. And if you came to, for example, Erlanger, you would learn the medical community and the community culture through multi-generational physician discourse. And as Lewis Carroll said, and we used to and still do, and I remember times just taking the doctors from the office and going across the street to the Chinese restaurant, and as the saying goes, talked of many things, of shoes and ships and sealing wax, of cabbages and kings, and why the sea is boiling hot and whether pigs have wings. Probably lose my mastership in the American College for having a slide that has both Osler and George Carlin on it at the same time. But you can look at that and say those sort of things that's all BS, but it's the BS, as George Carlin said, that's the glue that binds us together. It's something we need to value and protect moving forward, because too often with the fragmented care experiences with work hour limitations, instead of seeing a preemie through the first 24 hours, instead of reading a book all the way through. If your professor said, here's 4 books on pediatrics, I want you to read page 1 through 20 of this book, then pages 21 through 40 of the next, and so forth. Would you learn the same as if you read one book all the way through? And that is something, there are a lot of opportunities for better health, for better personal health, and for refining and advancing healthcare with our modern system. We have to be careful not to lose all that was good as well. Doctors now often eat leftovers or takeout while sitting at their cubicle, checking tasks, documenting in the EHR. HIPAA is very important. And of course, HIPAA violations still occur and they're very serious. But I was around and I was actually at an ASIM meeting, one of the precursors of the current ACP, when HIPAA was proposed as language, and our regulatory advisors came into the meeting and said, hey, we just read this new regulation. You all need to pay attention to this. We need to talk about this. It's very important to maintain the dignity and privacy of patients and work collectively with our colleagues. But that threat, that federal onus, along with our time pressures, is subtracting the context that we historically have had with colleagues to discuss and learn about conditions, to refresh ourselves and just stay connected. My last day in the office before I came down here, actually had an obstetrician who I know in town, known for a long time, call me up, said, I need your brain. Not for a patient of yours, but I've got a patient and I just found this. And I'm not sure what to do about it. And we had a professional medical conversation. He felt comfortable doing that. And we had a collegial conversation. No HIPAA was violated. Later that day, had a gentleman, middle-aged, come into the office. He called me 2 days of subjective fevers and night sweats and 2 days of significant volume of maroon hemoptysis in a non-smoker, and checked him out. It was a little dull over his upper lung fields, got some x-rays. And when the radiologist report came across, I went across the breezeway and met with the radiologist and looked at the films together. You know, teaching and learning happens at the bedside. And I hope for the house staff that are here today, you do still find your way to radiology to look at images or discuss things with the radiologist, because it will tell you much more as looking at this chest x-ray did than just reading the report. Those interactions are more rare, I find now, though. Instead, everybody's sitting silently in front of their computer screens. So we're seeing patients, yet we're isolated. We do interact with people every day. How could you be lonely? You saw 30 patients today. Well, we have interactions with patients, many of whom are friends who seek us out to be our patients because they know and respect us. Or we have patients that we see through continuity of care that over time become friends. And while there is value, of course, in these relationships, and that cannot be overemphasized, it's also true that this is a relationship of uneven sharing. There are appropriate and necessary limits which a physician should not and must not overstep with a patient because of the power disparities in the relationship, privacy standards, and other ethical considerations. But overall, there's enough of an inherent inhibitory effect on this dynamic that the connective healing of such relationships is limited for the physicians themselves. Isolation. This decreased engagement reduces the personal contact among consultants in the in-person chats. Talking with somebody that you see on rounds, sending them a personal note. They do actually still have a postal service. Or phone calls like I got from this OB have been replaced by electronic progress notes filled with facts and data, not communication or often thought. Increasingly isolated doctors can be a risk to themselves. In the COVID-19 pandemic, a study showed 50.4% of family practitioners met criteria not just for feeling lonely or isolated, but actually burned out. Isolation lessens self-efficacy. which is the perception that an individual has control over their life. And when we're isolated and separated, it's more difficult to recognize and help impaired or at-risk colleagues. Not creating time and space for connecting professionally may also, as my wife agreed when she reviewed my slides for me, place a disproportionate burden among women physicians. And there are no indications that gender role stresses of work-life balance are improving overall within the generational transitions for women physicians. As I said before, a key part of feeling lonely is feeling rejected, and that is the most damaging part. Once more, as Osler said, the practice of medicine is an art, not a trade, a calling, not a business, a calling in which your heart will be exercised equally with your head. I'm pleased and encouraged with what I've seen at Erlanger, that Erlanger's a business that also sees the value of the art and the calling in many ways. From my limited interactions, that's something, if people don't know you're looking for it when you come to visit or interview at a program, to make the impression that it's made on me in my short time here, I think that's genuine, and I hope you all see and give some encouragement to that within your system. Physicians face a lot of rejection and attempts, in it, whether conscious or not, to make us powerless. There's issues of loci of control in corporate employment. There are insurance company edicts and pre-authorizations, denials of coverage. As Dr. Carey heard me talking to one of my nurses as we were walking in, the costs of so-called covered medicines. Well, this medicine's covered, but it'll be $500. You know, there's a degree to which we don't have power over that. And of course, when it comes to patients, Dr. Google, and it's unintended, but repudiation of our training and experience is a form of rejection. It's one we can deal with, but we're in an environment, and harder, faster, quicker can it ever be enough? Oh, sorry, that didn't frame well. So social media and online escape, some physicians will turn to non-medical online forums and other online communities to ease or assuage feelings of isolation and loneliness. And the anonymity of the internet can free a physician in some unique ways, but it also compels the physician to conceal themselves somewhat, particularly with their medical identity. Of course, it's essential that we avoid additional potential medical legal liability in providing online medical advice, no matter how well intended. And balancing this set of imaginary friends against the real world challenges and obligations can be a detrimentally difficult balance to strike for many. Social media can bring together people with mutual interests or make it easier for friends and colleagues to make plans, but it also, as I think we've all seen, amplifies disagreement and siphons people into increasingly divisive echo chambers. There are just, frankly, limitations to technology and what it can do. The internet age and the robustness of mobile technology was to bring us all together, to help us communicate, connect, and elevate society. But mobile devices don't make one happy. Quite the opposite. Many studies have shown even brief time spent on popular social media sites reduces happiness and self-esteem scores. In fact, many household name moguls of such technology have restricted their own children, teenagers, family from using social media. The real limitation in a smart device-based communication is we aren't allowed to see each other. And I mean that in terms, if you all remember the movie Avatar, the way the Na'vi would say when they see each other, I see you. They don't mean, yep, there you are standing there. They see the soul, they see the person, they have that connection. And we can't do that because it's too easy to put up a false face, a mask, to hide our feelings. We can simply have our posts go unanswered or simply be misunderstood. Marriage, as my wife and our examples, rates of dual physician marriage have increased substantially in the last 30 years. And it's a great benefit, many potential positives to having a partner who shares the training and the journey of being a physician. But it must not be assumed that this style relationship inherently resolves issues of professional loneliness. There are differences in specialties, particularly across the medical and surgical divide. Those of you that are med peds physicians, you're twice the physician of either my wife or I, because I'm an internist and she's a pediatrician. We have a lot we share in common, but there's a lot professionally that we just have to chalk up that the other, has it and has control of it. And that can be substantive and limiting in conversation. You can have a mantra of let's leave work at work. Home is for home, home is for family. And that can be very beneficial, but is of course also a double-edged sword in the same way. We have colleagues, even today, as EHR transitions continue to go, that will bring work home, and they will get home at 6 o'clock and they'll eat dinner with the family. And then from 7 to 11, they're on the computer in their study working on the EHR, and then they go to bed and get up and go to the office in the morning. That's not the dynamic I think any of us envisioned when we were filling out our applications hoping we'd be accepted to medical school. Loneliness begets loneliness. We have to be the change that breaks this cycle. So some introspection. Our profession often struggles with ourselves as much as our patients. We engage in hard and often emotionally draining work, and struggling alone with a problem, a patient, a choice is a reality at times for all of us, and we accept that. That's why we're these professionals and we overcome it. But these challenges are compounded by isolation and loneliness, and we have the options to help ourselves and help each other, because there are others who have these common shared perspectives, and we can bond and build. The key is talk. Osler said, use your 5 senses to learn, to see, to hear, to feel, to smell, and know that by practice alone you can become expert. And while you may smell a DKA or a melanotic school, I'm not encouraging you to lean to your left and smell your colleague in the lecture hall. We can take some of these same skills to perceive when our colleagues need connection or are struggling, because connectedness is the one antidote to exhaustion. It has been documented in studies that social interactions and friendships among medical students decreases the tendency to experience emotional and physical exhaustion. And I think we would all say, coming through the COVID pandemic, we would all say emotional and physical exhaustion has been a present companion, omnipresent with us these last couple of years. The more related physicians feel to each other, the higher the level of professional well-being, satisfaction, and energy in their work, particularly true in health systems. And it's much easier, again, to see the pain in a colleague's face than to search for that meaning in their text message or their EHR note, because communication is, of course, physical and nonverbal as well. Joining and coming together really helps. Coming out of the pandemic, being able to meet in person, being able to travel, to network, I'm hopeful we'll actually see a resurgence in participation in activities in organizations like the ACP, the RCP, the AAP, Wilderness Medical Society. These organizations provide potential leadership and enrichment activities, particularly for residents and early career physicians. Tennessee in particular, I know, does well with college and medical school alumni organizations and professional support entities. SVMIC last night here in town had a free CME event, a chance again to come together and have a shared learning experience. One of the things that I enjoy the most when I go to these meetings is reconnecting to physicians that have that spark, that inspire me, they seem like they're on another plane. And one of those is Dr. Andrew Goddard, who's the president of the Royal College of Physicians. And this was his closing paragraph in his last communication to the membership. He gave me permission to share it. Although many miles, I'm not going to try and say it in his accent, which is lovely, but although many miles separate us, it was clear the things that drive us to do medicine are the same the world over, and our desire to improve patient care is a strong and uniting force. I left the meetings in Chicago and Melbourne inspired again and reminded that we are able to recharge each other's enthusiasm by the simple act of spending time together. We each have our individual strengths that we bring. You wouldn't be in this position in life if you didn't. And developing and maintaining relationships is a primary care core competency. We also have to be compassionate with ourselves and our colleagues and our staff, accept each other where they are in these journeys professionally, personally, support them in their growth and development as they hope that they will support us. Do see your physician consistently and on schedule for your own medical care, and be open to recommendations that they might make. There's solutions that can be found in promoting community and workplace connectedness. One of the things that my wife's department in the Navy would do in the calendar year, every time a month had the 5th Friday in it, the department would close all the outpatient clinics that Friday afternoon. They'd work together on the inpatient stuff, wrap it all up, and they would have a communal experience, whether it was going to a baseball field or bowling alley or what have you, to bond and experience life together, not just work together as a department. We've taken this on and we do this in my office as well. Themed events in the office, whether it's something revolved around NCAA tournaments or games or what have you, or just themes that you pick up, invitations to get together with other offices and staff, or just to do things personally at home with colleagues. With our kids, we used to do theme dinners all of the time. We would have Burns night and serve vegetarian haggis. We would have events for many different things. We would celebrate different cultures, and our kids learned a lot and help them develop as people. We can do this with our friends, be they doctors or not, or doctors, now that we can get together more as COVID abates. Activities are important to overcome loneliness. And of course, there is no one answer. Each has their own solutions and ways to find. Individually, we can seek out exercise classes, have a communal activity. We know that boosts serotonin, endorphins. Find time for ourselves to meditate and pray. Increase your own centered self and peace. It's okay to be alone and not be lonely. Work for a change of scene. East Tennessee is awesome. Lots of hiking opportunities, kayaking, fishing. My middle child is a med student, a 3rd year now. Last year, while COVID was going on, she was number 10 in Jefferson County on the reported list in the Bird Watchers Association for numbers of bird species seen. You can adopt a pet that fits your circumstance. We've always had and done well with dogs. My eldest, who's a 4th year medical student, got a cat right before the pandemic. She's been indispensable to her. I suppose depending on your disposition, fish might fit the bill. I find them sort of difficult to pet or take on walks, but if you're a fish person, that's part of who you are. Gardening, you can do it on your own property. Recent studies have actually shown gardening in your front yard as opposed to your backyard enhances sense of community. There are, if you have an apartment, a townhome, communal gardens. There's at least 5 of them in Chattanooga. We also, mentioning the health department, have started a communal garden on the grounds next to the parking lot of the health department. And the small plot that's there and what it produces is provided to neighbors to help with some of the local issues of a food desert. Could be something you look and see if there are opportunities with the program or the health department in this county. Music, of course, can be a great healer, whether you learn or pick back up an instrument, listen to your favorite music, or explore new genres. reinvigorating yourself with old hobbies, for me, woodworking, furniture building, taking on new skills. If you go and take classes, even just occasionally in the community, doctors need friends that aren't doctors. They'll be delighted to see you. Um, this is not a set of Google pictures. At the beginning of the pandemic, what you see here was part of the side yard of our house, and it was just flat plain grass. My wife and I together designed and carried this out, maximizing the skills of each. Everything you see here growing is because of her, not me. I move rocks. But we have together created a permanent space that we can share, we can pray and meditate in, we can grow together and watch the space evolve. We have to be open. We all have our strengths, we all have our weaknesses. None of us are a finished product. And so we have to avoid being negative on others who haven't reached that full level of spark themselves. And we have to be patient with ourselves as well. We're physicians, we're our own harshest critics, I'm sure. Seeking help must not be viewed as a sign of weakness, but rather a sign of strength, that this is someone who has the wisdom and professional maturity to express vulnerability and seek opportunity. Some of the very best physicians, the ones we admire the most, the ones, if I think about too much given the talk, I'll start to tear up, have suffered, have sought help and gotten better. And those physicians universally then have a profound empathy that helps throughout their local medical community. It helps them better relate to and care for their patients and their colleagues and serve as great examples for us. As a physician, your well-being is crucial to your patient's health and your longevity as a caregiver. Don't wait until you're at your wit's end to ask for help and guidance. Seek it early and often. There's a broad breakdown in human desires and abilities and frailties of high states versus low states. If you think about your prior friendships and relationships that have worked, I think you'll reach the same conclusion that I have. We have to overcome what we think should work if we want actual successful connections. And if we reflect back on actual successful historical examples, we'll be more successful in engaging people that are constructive, positive elements in our lives. I mentioned my wife. Every time when I was in the dating world, I thought I wanted to have a relationship with this person, or I sought that person out. It didn't work. When I was patient and still and waited and watched for what was actually successful, I found my wife sitting right beside me in a lecture before gross anatomy. What relationship characteristics have worked for you in the past to create positive, peaceful, and wisdom-enhancing friendships? Those are your high state relationship characteristics. Other characteristics for you are neutral or negative, and everybody's list is going to be different. But applying this in practice has been shown to lead to better relationships, less stress, both in the relationships and in the individuals, and for the individuals, better health, improved longevity, and self-esteem. We want to seek the truthful, the inspirational, and the real, because if it isn't true, it isn't real, so that we can optimize long-term. We want to review the masks that you wear, and I don't mean for COVID. I mean the masks that we all wear, the one that we currently exhibit to the world of how we want the world to see us. And as you take that off, you'll find more masks. Within yourself, look at each mask that contains the fears, the worries, and within yourself, attempt to discard them. Once you're successful, you can find that underneath, there's a content, happy, and accepting person. My own father, who's from Alabama, as some people in the audience are, is obviously somebody I knew most all of my life up till now. And I saw the face that he put to the world. He was not a doctor. I also saw beneath that where some of the cracks in his mask were. It wasn't until he went through the experience of dying from a stage 4 neuroendocrine carcinoma that was found in his chest on routine low dose CT scanning 365 days after, even in retrospect, a completely clear one. 365 days later, stage 4 disease. Less than a year later, he passed. But one of the most valuable things I learned in that experience was watching as the process of dying and moving on to the next world progressed for him. He shed his masks. The person that I saw underneath all of his masks was so refreshing. It was somebody I'd always hoped was there. I'd seen some signs and I'd figured was there. I hope it doesn't take that for me and for each of us to get to that point. When I rehearsed the speech, I wasn't going there, so give me a second. Truths are fundamental, cannot be removed or evaded. That's how you know it's a truth. Our conscience is our awareness of truth and honesty. When our conscience is telling us we're moving off of where we're supposed to be, we're moving away from truth, we're at risk for moving into the low states. By being conscious within ourselves of overcoming what is blocking our personal growth and ascendance to a higher state of completion, one's own sense of loneliness will inevitably diminish, and others will be actually attracted to us to initiate or maintain meaningful interactions as they go through their journeys in life as well. Our common blocks, particularly as physicians: rationalization, denial, overcompensation, overeagerness to be liked, defensiveness, a strong sense of duty. These are tools. We use these to elevate a person's healthcare and to fight for what's right in the system. But they're double-edged swords, and they can cut us as well if we aren't fully cognizant. We have to stay connected to the environment in which truth exists within ourselves and within the art and science of medicine and the environment we practice it in, so that we understand it better and achieve a high state of appropriateness as well. And it's okay to be confused at times, because the overlay of reality on truth can be associated with confusion, inconclusiveness, indecision, and mystery, particularly if we're truthful about what we don't know. And that can be hard on rounds. If you ask Dr. Carr where he did his surgical training and about that experience, he was at U of L, which is where my wife and I went and my daughters are now. The chair of the department there was Hiram Polk, notorious department chair. He can tell you a lot about the perils of admitting to your attending what you don't know. But again, we have the opportunity in the new system and the growth that we hope we're taking as a profession, that if we do it appropriately and constructively, we can express this, because how else do we really learn? By maintaining one's core self in a high state of acceptance and waiting patiently, eventually the truth will reveal itself. It may take advancements in science for the truth to reveal itself. That's why we have a career, and that's why we stand where we do for our patients, to be their advocates, because we're not Dr. Google or a website that is giving a flashy appearance and a seductive sale. We are their physicians, and we practice this art. And the more you maintain this consistency and your healer's intentions, the high state of service can be both fulfilled and fulfilling. We're all human. We have ups and downs and good days and bad days, and we get tired and we make mistakes. Grant yourself forgiveness, both for things in the past and for things that may happen today. Going to be the help to others that you'd want to have for yourself, but also be that help to yourself as well. As Dr. Fry said, not valuing time with other physicians or allowing for informal conversations leads to a soulless efficiency and professional isolation that drains physicians of our ability to help ourselves, help each other, and help patients. I had mentioned these, and I'm just going to leave this up here, not review them, but I think as you think for yourself, you can see what high states are, where low states can come in. The high states for physicians, this paradigm wasn't written by a physician, but I think for the medical profession, it's a list that resonates so thoroughly. It's why you're a part of the highest professional calling, to be a physician. Valuing truthfulness, respect, appreciation, being mutually supportive, living a life of service, being fair but objective in our observations, working prioritization and triage. As Osler has said, to be content to do the one day's work, take one day at a time. Forgiveness. Forgive the non-adherent patient, but try and help them grow from their low state to have a greater understanding and better health. Forgive yourself. Forgive a colleague. Work together to be better. Be generous of spirit, but responsible. Work with gratitude. It's fine to be proud. Pride, for its own valid sake, isn't a sin. You should each be proud of where you've gotten in life, what you've achieved, what you've done in your career to be in this position that you are. That's an honest pride. That's not false pride or false humility. There's a balance. And I think from the interactions I've had here, you all have an excellent foundation to build from in learning and practicing that. Being appropriate, communicating effectively and responsibly the shared wisdom that we have, whether it's an attending to an intern, whether it's on something non-medical, whether it's interpersonal, being accepting, understanding reality, profiting from this experience. We all hope to grow, and I still hope to grow to become more complete as people. And then you see those physicians that really have that spark. And I hope that you work on this journey yourselves, individually and together, calling on each other, make new connections, and see more of the medical world that's out there, because the challenges aren't going to stop. And I'm very confident that you all are going to be a great part of meeting it. And I thank you for your time today.
With his permission, his slide set available. Go back to what done. And I think the recording can also.
And if John wouldn't mind, if he could reduce the font size on that one slide that the title ran over on the topic.
Well, I want to thank Greg for his time. He's on his way to Emory, family, and his heart, which I greatly appreciate. And I think all of you.
Thank you.